it's recording now. Thank you.
All right, great. Okay. So I know that I have met several of you before who are here, but for those of you who do not know me, my name's Lindsay. I am from the United States, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I've been living here in Sao Paulo for about a year and a half now. Um, and I think I've been teaching with Super Teacher for maybe like a year and 3 months now. I'm not sure exactly. But before I moved here, I was teaching English at a couple different universities in the United States. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today are things that I've used in my classes there, and I think they could be really useful here now that we're starting to teach more online. So before we do get started, I want to make sure I tell you that as soon as we're done with our workshop today, I'm going to share this slide presentation with you in the Skype chat so that you can have access to the slides and all the links that are in here. So you don't have to like rush to write everything down while we're going. Cool. All right.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So first, before we get into some of the tools I want to talk about, just some discussion questions. So how has teaching online changed your lessons? Or if you're not online now, how do you imagine it would change your lessons?
Can I start?
Absolutely.
I know you cannot see me. Teaching me online actually has taken me from this comfort zone that I had, especially when you are a teacher for a while and then you face new ways for you to communicate students. Of course, once and then I've already taught online, etc., but not specifically like I'm doing now. Yes. And especially with COVID and all the situations we're facing, emotional situation, etc. I feel that we are trying, giving our best to do the best for the students. So it's always a big effort to create that. So it's been challenging, but at the same time, a good challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I understand that idea that you went from something that is comfortable to something that is definitely less so, right? Yeah. Anybody else?
There are. I have already taught online some classes, some material, but as a usual, a routine
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
methodology is the first time. And in the beginning, I faced some problems, of course, as everybody, I
Mm-hmm.
believe, because uh, we are not familiarized totally with this new need.
Mm-hmm.
But with some adjustments, some changes in the regular, like a regular class, some things that I did in classroom, but now I do as a homework, for example.
Yeah.
So I'm using much more the hour, the class time in the speaking and in the speaking task. So it's been very profitable for the student, I believe.
Yeah, that's great. That's a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, actually, is sort of refocusing your priorities, right? So,
Mhm.
uh, spending more of that in class time online, actually talking. Yeah, excellent. Here we some people have already mentioned some of the pros and cons, but is there anything more specific about ways teaching online can be easier or more difficult?
I think it depends because, for example, I like teaching from home. It's not easy, as people were talking about, but it's good because you don't have to leave, you don't have to go out to your house. And I prefer, it's my opinion, I prefer face-to-face classes. But I like it. The idea is not leaving my home, but I prefer face-to-face classes because I think you can feel the difficulty from your students, and I don't know, something like that.
The other day I was teaching a group of teenagers, and actually having the tools, online tools, actually helped me a lot to situate them into the topic and make them give them the right tools for them to talk and then develop their conversation skills. So I guess we always have the pros and cons. Yes. When we are, I also prefer face-to-face classes because you actually feel the student, if the student's getting the topic, or if he's learning, etc. Doing that online, you need to develop this skill again, because you need to create this environment that's comfortable for the student to learn too. So I feel that we have pros and cons doing it.
Yeah, great points. I also definitely do not miss my commute. It's nice, being at home. But you're also right that you have that comfort, that feel in the class that, everybody's used to. And you definitely do have to relearn how to create that same environment online. Yeah, great.
That is something that I was about to say. For me, it's been really interesting because for online sessions, you really need to prepare your classes. There's no way to, show up to the class and just speak up. No, you need to prepare something. And another interesting thing is that some students, they are really good in technology, and you learn from them. So that is another good thing that I've learned during these online sessions. Yeah.
And
Lucky
sometimes
you,
it's
lucky you, because all my students are terrible about technology.
Lindsay, I think online classes make students more passive, and I don't believe in this learning model methodology. I have a hard time with that.
Okay, yeah. A couple different things there. Yeah, there is definitely a learning curve to both teaching and learning with the technology, right? Some people learn quicker and are more able to adapt, and it takes other people a little bit longer. Sometimes it does give an excuse to students to be more passive, like Marcio was saying. I've also found that some of my students are more easily distracted. If we're meeting on Skype, they might have coworkers send them messages, or that they're sending messages or checking their phone, right? And these types of distractions wouldn't happen in a regular class, face to face.
I agree.
Yeah. And the last sort of open question here before we dive into some things are, what kind of online tools are you currently using in your lessons?
Videos,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
sound, audio, yes.
Audios,
Videos,
audios, videos,
PDF, PDF
Mm-hmm.
files.
links
Mm,
to articles, links to some subject, to give kind of guided conversation,
Yeah.
for mainly advanced students, upper intermediate advanced students. So links related to, for example, this new situation, the home office situation that
Mm-hmm.
everybody's leaving now.
I've been using Google Drive, so I've created some folders for each student, and it's been really interesting because all the students can have this access to this Google Drive. So sometimes I have them do homework, so they can do it easily from these folders.
Mm-hmm.
And well, yeah. Claudette said TED Talks. She is using TED Talks.
Yeah, and I think I saw Cambridge English down there also, which is a very useful website. Yeah. Um, I also use Google Drive and all the Google tools a lot. Um, if you have a Gmail account, I find this just incredibly convenient and useful because everything's connected.
Yes,
yes.
Yeah,
I use it a lot, by the way.
nice. Yeah. Okay, great. Um, hopefully in the next half hour or so, we can review some new tools to use and kind of, toss around some ideas. But the first thing I want to sort of review is how we really need to rethink the way we see the classroom when we're teaching online. And this kind of starts with assessing the situation. Um, so we all know that our students want both convenience and quality out of their lessons. Um, and this is something I think that technology actually really helps us do. Um, at first, I think, teaching online and learning all these new tools might seem inconvenient, but after you get over that, initial hump, uh, it really does help make things more convenient. But I also think it's very important to understand that while technology gives us access to all these resources and new materials, it doesn't just create engagement. And it takes both teacher and student effort here. So teachers really need to create and structure their lessons well and use these tools in meaningful ways. Uh, it's important to remember that just putting a video into your lesson isn't enough to create engagement and be effective. You know, you really have to make sure that all the components of your lessons are serving a purpose. And I think the other part of that is that you really have to know your students. Some students, like Marcio was saying, they don't like online classes. They don't think they're productive. They prefer face to face. You have to know what that student wants and also what they're willing and able to do. Um, some students are not good at using technology or they're not very internet savvy. So you need to make sure that you're giving them tools that they can actually use. And especially those of us who are teaching adults, uh, some adult students don't want to play games because it seems childish, right? Some adult students have very busy professional lives and they don't want to do homework. Or maybe they say they want homework, but they don't actually do it, right? We have this, expression in English that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right?
Mhm.
So you have to know your students and what they can do. Yeah, but it's just important to remember that when we're teaching online, our classroom changes both literally and figuratively. So you can't just keep doing the same thing that you were doing in person. Um, you have to restructure and adapt a little bit. All right. So the first thing to, oops, sorry about that. The first thing to consider here is what our classroom looks like. And a really great structure to consider when you're teaching online is this flipped classroom. Has anybody heard of this before or familiar with this idea?
Mm.
Nope.
Mm. Great.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
kind of, yes, kind of.
mm. So this is an idea that has been discussed both at like the K through 12 education level and in higher education for maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now. And the idea is that um, your students introduce themselves to, in our case, maybe grammar concepts or vocabulary sets before class for homework. And then in class, you actually do activities with those concepts. You write, you discuss, you play games, and you engage with those concepts in a more practical and real world situation. Um, and this is great for teaching online because when you have online content, your students have access to this outside of class. So they can introduce themselves to this material and come to class prepared. And this takes a lot of pressure off us as teachers because, as you know, it's practically impossible to introduce a concept, teach it, practice it, and try to apply it all in 1 hour or an hour and a half, however long your classes are. So when students come to class prepared in this way, um, I've personally found that they can ask more meaningful questions and actually advance their understanding and learning. Instead of spending 15, 20 minutes or however long being confused. And I forget who said it earlier, but this frees up a lot of time for students to talk and have conversation. And I'm sure it's not just my students, but they love to talk.
Yes.
That's probably their favorite part of the class. Great. So the other reason that this model is good is that here we're looking at the Bloom's taxonomy, right? In the traditional model of class, you spend most of your time introducing and trying to get your students to understand concepts in class. And then we give them homework outside of class, like writing and watching videos and, these kinds of projects. And on the upper half of the pyramid here is really where your students are learning the language and skills that they're going to use at work or when they're traveling. The useful parts of the language. So when you flip the classroom, you are changing your priorities, you're changing your focus. So students read about, present perfect, or introduce themselves to vocabulary terms and definitions outside of class, and then we focus on using those in class. And I'm sure we've all, heard Gabriel talk about emphasis on the communicative approach, and this really allows us to emphasize that, freeing up more time for conversation and discussion in our class. Cool. Any questions about this model in general?
Questions, no, but facing
Comments?
challenges here. Comments, yes. Especially when you teach young kids or teenagers. The
Yeah.
part outside class
Yeah.
is difficult for them to apply and to practice because it needs a lot of discipline for them to keep doing it. What I've been feeling that they are able to to get the concept of the language that I am teaching or is being taught, but applying it or the phase that we call it the accountability, it's being short and it's being not so productive. So I've been feeling that we're doing it. I am exposing them to a lot of things that online provides me that is excellent. But in the end, making them doing the useful language, yeah, it's a kind of a bit complicated because you need to pair up the students, you need to make group work, individual work, and then sometimes internet can create this block. Yes, just like ice block that, and so that's it.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And especially, like you're saying, for younger children, how much can you really expect from them? That's definitely a challenge. And when it comes to, preparing group work and that kind of thing, um, it's more effort on the part of the teacher, is I guess what you were getting at. Um, And something that a point that I was going to make later, is that this doesn't have to be every single class, you know? But this is a good way to mix it up and to make sure that you have some classes that are really focused on using the language and collaborating with other students, having those group projects or strictly conversation focused classes. But yeah, I do completely understand those challenges. Yeah. Great. All right. So here are some tools that we can use to sort of help us create this flipped classroom. But something that I want to point out is that even if you don't, prescribe by this flipped classroom model, these are all still tools that you can use in your classes together with your students. As we're all aware, there are a ton of ESL channels on YouTube. This one that I have here is just linked to a guy that I think does really great explanations of grammar concepts. But another reason that I really like these YouTube channels is that they give good resources to students to practice their pronunciation. I know Gabriel has showed this to me, but Rachel's English is a great YouTube channel to assign your students to watch for some homework so that they can get that pronunciation practice. The second one here, I think it was Claudette, mentioned TED Talks already. And personally, I love TED Talks. There is a talk for literally any topic you can think of. So these are great to supplement for the textbook you're using. If you're doing a unit on travel or hobbies or, I mean, anything, there's a talk for it. I think that they're really great for younger students and adult students. They've got videos that are strictly animated that are good for younger students, and also some more, inspirational talks I think that adults like a lot. And some other reasons I think this is really great is that people give TED Talks from countries all over the world, and it's a really great way to introduce your students to different accents, which is something that some of my students talk about a lot if they do business with people from different countries. It's good to introduce them to those accents. And also for people who are teaching adult students, this is a great way to supplement some business material. They have a lot of very business-focused talks here. And on the website, you can search for things based on these topics. And you can also search based on length. So if you want a video for in class, you can choose something under 4 minutes. Or if it's for homework, you can pick longer. Newspaper articles. This first link here is for specifically an ESL news website. And this is helpful because every article that is on there, you can choose a different English level. It's 1, 2, and 3. So it's like A1, A2, B1, B2, and then more advanced. And depending on which level you choose, the length of the article gets longer, the vocabulary gets a little more difficult, and at the end of the news article, there's also like a video that kind of accompanies it. So that's great. Grammar explanations and exercises. These are just a couple that I use kind of regularly. If you're using a textbook, I'm using the Speak Out series, the grammar explanation in those is pretty short. It's just a small box where they expect your students to sort of complete the rules. And oftentimes my students want more of an explanation than that. So this is a great way to introduce those grammar concepts to them, maybe before class, so they can come a little more prepared. Or each of these websites has exercises for more practice that you can give them for homework or to work through together in class. And this last one here is a website that I really like a lot.
Yes.
You use it also?
I like.
Yeah. And one of the things I really like about this is pretty recently, they've started creating ESL lesson plans specifically for flipped classrooms. So it gives a short assignment to your students before class. Maybe it's a video to watch. Maybe it's a vocabulary exercise. And then they give you ideas for activities to practice it in class. And the other thing I really like about this website is you don't have to use the whole lesson as they give it to you. Oftentimes I will just use the video, or maybe just the video and a vocab exercise. But it's really helpful, especially just for getting ideas. Does anybody who has experience with these have any comments or further suggestions?
Not with this. I use also the BBC.
Yeah, BBC is great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'd like to say all of these are really, really good. I've been using all of these, not all of these, the last ones I didn't know, but most of these I've done for a while, and they're really good material. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know that I do this also, but before teaching online, these were often things that I would use in class. But if we're trying to think about how to flip our classrooms and better utilize that in-class time, these are all things that your students can do on their own. They don't need your help with it. So it's a great thing to give them for homework. Awesome.
I teach Portuguese for foreigners. So
That's a little different. Sorry.
there is no problem.
Let's see. Oh, and something else that I had some problems with when I first started using this classroom model is that sometimes you might give your student a newspaper article to read for homework, but then you go to have class and they haven't read it, right? You expect them to come prepared, but they don't. And a nice thing about the flipped classroom is that you're always going to be kind of over prepared, right? If your student doesn't read the news article, then just read it together in class and get that speaking practice. You can correct their pronunciation and then continue with the lesson you had planned. But I always feel comfortable knowing that I have, enough material prepared when I do this, which is also nice. Great. So, like I was saying, when we flip the classroom and give our students a little bit more agency and responsibility, then we create more time in class for collaborative learning. Can anybody kind of explain what this is or why it's important?
If I am not wrong, because it's a new term for me, what I use with my students is that when one of them shows a difficulty in one topic, I ask the other ones to help them solve the problem. Would it be something similar to this?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely a very good example.
Okay.
And if I can pick on you a little bit more, why do you make the other students help them or explain?
I based this way into it's kind of an inductive. So I make students realize their mistakes by teaching the others. So that makes them aware in the class. So that makes them more participative. And it takes the weight of me and I give to them. So it's a way for them to teach and I just guide them in that moment.
Yeah, no, it's always great when you can take the pressure off of yourself as a teacher. um, I learned that teaching university classes where you're talking to like a classroom full of like 30, 20-year-olds. I want them to ask and answer the questions. But also, like you were saying, it helps them realize their mistakes. And there have been a lot of studies that when students are able to explain a concept and teach it to other people, that they retain it and can use that information more effectively themselves.
Okay.
So yeah.
I try to use this, but in my case, is all my classes are individual.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have this aid, to ask somebody. But I try to do this when the student is developing an idea to
Mm-hmm.
incentivize them to produce more. Okay, go from this point, explain better, go deeper, to produce more language.
Exactly, and that's collaborative also.
Hmm.
Collaborative learning is definitely easier when you have, a small group of students, but it happens one-on-one, just teacher to student also. And exactly what you're saying, trying to like pull or elicit vocabulary out of them, getting them to produce more language or push their ideas further.
Yes.
Definitely. Let's see.
For example, when I'm in a one-to-one student and the student's trying to come up with a sentence and he can't because he forgot some vocabulary or format, uh, I cannot ask anyone to help the student, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
actually only give the student the sentence or the word. I try to use like or a break or I give the middle word or the last letter, sorry, or the first and the last letter, and the student creates this need to complete, and then after all, he end up completing it, and I guess that helps fixating the word or the sentence, the structure.
Exactly. Also collaborative. So it definitely seems more difficult to create this kind of environment when it is just one-on-one, but it's simple things like that that also create this environment and allow for collaboration just between one teacher and one student. Yeah. Um, so, like we were saying earlier, um, when we create this space in our lesson, it allows us to prioritize discussion and conversation. And this is collaboration, you know? If you're not just solely talking at your student or only letting your student speak, having real meaningful conversation, questioning them, pushing their ideas further. This is collaboration. And like we were also saying, uh, having students explain concepts to each other is great. But you can also make students explain concepts to you. Um, it's very common for me to hear in my classes. Uh, I try to explain something, and my student says, "Okay, okay, yeah, I get it." But do they really get it? Is the
Hmm.
question that
Hmm.
I'm always asking. So uh, have them explain it to you. This shows that they can remember concepts, that they actually understand it. And I think that when students are able to explain ideas to you, it really does help build their confidence, which is something that a lot of language students, are lacking. Let's see. Oh, another reason that it's important to have more focus on conversation is that um, when you're doing grammar exercises or very like structured, like fill in the blank or matching kind of exercises in a book, your student might be able to complete those very easily or even perfectly in some instances. But then when you shift to less structured, informal conversation, it's like everything they learned kind of goes out the window, right? And they make those mistakes. And it's important for them to make those mistakes so that you can correct them and give them that opportunity to learn and advance their understanding. But if you don't prioritize conversation, then you don't give them that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Oh, and then these two ideas here at the bottom, for those of us who do teach one-on-one, I think it is important to try to, give them low pressure opportunities to actually speak with other students. So I've started talking to Gabriel about these two ideas here. And the first one is discussion boards. This link here is a link to Dave's ESL Cafe discussion board. I don't know if anybody has seen that or found it before online. It's been inactive for like 2 years now, but we could potentially put a discussion board on the Super Teacher website. And this gives students the opportunity to talk to each other. You could put links to videos and news articles and have people share opinions. This is another kind of thing that, if it existed, you could assign to your student for homework. But it's also really great for teachers to share ideas and share resources. And the other one is to have small group conversation. Gabriel did mention that we have like a conversation club.
Yes, that's
yeah.
the name, conversation club. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is also another thing we could consider to supplement our regular classes. And I think it's important because when you're teaching one-on-one or even in a small group, your students get very comfortable with you, you know? They get used to the flow of your conversation, the way you speak. It becomes easier for them to understand you. And when you have these conversation classes, it helps to mix things up. It keeps your students on their toes. And like we were saying before, they can learn from each other, which is important. So if there is interest in these ideas, maybe it's something that we could get started. Does anybody have any opinions?
That's quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about how to develop this.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
go ahead.
Sorry, because I was processed, you know.
Yeah.
Well, discussion boards, it can be done as a warm up, okay,
Mm-hmm.
like a prep for a topic that we're going to discuss, or even the accountability thinking now, okay.
Yeah.
After you expose the topics, after everything, then, okay, you might as well initiate a discussion board for them to expose what they learn or their opinion about it, especially
Mm-hmm.
with the advanced or upper intermediate students.
Yeah. And the other nice thing about the discussion board is that you will have that mix of levels. So lower level students can see the kind of language that a higher level student is producing. I think it's important for students to be able to kind of like gauge where they're at, which is something that when you're teaching one-on-one, your students might not really have the opportunity to see.
They don't have sometimes the notion of their development.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. And the last thing here is just kind of like some other ideas that teaching online allows us to do. The first one here is student-created quizzes or study materials. And this is good for your one-on-one students and your like small group students. Especially at the end of a unit. We have those unit reviews in the textbooks usually, but if your students can decide for themselves what is important and understand the context around a grammar concept or a set of vocabulary, then it's, helping them to think about it in a different way. You can do this on a lot of websites for free, like SurveyMonkey, or right here below that. I don't know if anybody has used Quizlet before, but it's a website that allows you to create flashcards and like practice games to study material for free.
You also can do it on Google Classroom. They have this
Yeah.
tool. No.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Awesome.
I also use Kahoot, but with teenagers. They love Kahoot. Yes.
That's one that I've just started exploring.
Yeah, I've tried with some adults, but in that time we were not only online, yes. The other school that I work, I had the opportunity to go to the lab that they call, and then I used Kahoot. I wouldn't say that all the time doing it with adults seems okay, but from time to time, especially when you feel that they overcame like this like massive topic or a difficult one, doing it a little game like something just to amuse them sounds fun. It relaxes them. Yeah. So after the tests, for example, or after some difficult topic that you face it with them, and then after they feel relaxed. It's like a 20-minute class that they laugh, but of course, if you do it all the time, they feel that they are not learning, they are just playing games. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, it's important to have balance for sure. Yeah. While we're just on the topic of games, this last link here is a link to a game called, or sorry, a link to a website called EduKPlay. I might still have it open. It's this really awesome website that allows you to create a couple different kinds of games and activities. You can make, yeah, here it is. You can create fill-in-the-blank exercises, crossword puzzles, word searches. I just made a memory game for adjectives, so you can make students find the synonyms, or you can match an adjective with a picture, or they even have a component where you can add audio. So maybe a student needs to match a sound, like you speak the word with the written word. And it's also free, which is great.
Cool. Very good.
Yeah. Has anybody used the VOA podcast before?
Never.
This is one that a student actually showed to me, which is pretty cool. It stands for Voice of America, and you can download it as an app on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I have students who like listen to it while they're commuting to work, or they're just short 10-minute audio clips to listen to in your downtime. But they are also nice because if you want, there's a transcript that you can read along while you're listening. So that's another just useful resource for your students to use. I suppose you could assign it for homework also, but typically this is something that my students just do on their own. Let's see. Blogs is something that I'm going to start using with my students, with one of my students in the next week, but I've used it in the past and it's really helpful. Like in the Speak Out textbook that I'm using, there's at least one writing assignment in every unit, and I'll usually tell the students to complete it for homework. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they obviously Google translated something, but it doesn't ever seem like a huge priority. But if you have your student create a blog, I usually use WordPress. It's just the platform that I'm familiar with. Then you can make this more of a priority also. You can complete the writing activities in the book. You can have your students respond to videos or news articles. And you can start it together in class to kind of like get the ball rolling and have them finish for homework. But one of the reasons I really like this is that it's a record so that both you and your students can see their progress, which is something that someone mentioned earlier. I forget who it was. But students can see how their vocabulary has developed, how they're able to write longer responses, maybe more complex sentences. And it's important as a teacher to be able to identify your students' progress and where they can go in the future. But I think it's also very common that students don't see or acknowledge their own progress. And this is a way that you can show them that they are improving, right? And another tool that I've been using a lot in classes lately are animated shorts. Like Pixar does a lot of these, right? They're just 3, 4, maybe 5-minute short videos. And these are great for any level because there's no words, right? There's no dialogue. So you can use them with a beginner student or an advanced student. And it's a really great tool to use for like eliciting vocabulary out of your students. And they can do it, at any level, as much as they can elicit or, whatever level vocabulary, because, there's no words in the video to either help or distract them from that. And just the last thing here is I've been using Google Maps a lot lately also to do those taking or receiving and giving directions exercises, or to practice numbers like addresses, phone numbers, hours of operation, that kind of thing. But you and your student can, interact on the same Google map. You can drop a pin and tell them to give you directions to the closest metro station or whatever it might be. But it's a really great tool that we all use. We all know how to use it, and it's good real world application of the language. Yes. So, just as a general discussion, does anybody have any other ideas or opinions, or do any of these things, these tools, seem like something you might want to use in your classes?
Yeah, it was very
Yeah,
helpful
definitely.
indeed.
Definitely, there are good ideas to search, to develop, and to try to use in classes.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely.
Yes,
Quiz and
I like it
blogs.
so
Yeah.
much.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was really helpful. Thanks.
It is helpful because, as Marshall said, sometimes I face the same problem as he does, the difficulty of producing, not
Mm-hmm.
mine, of course, but the student production. How to incentivize? They are more passive than active. So these tools that you can transform, you can change the game
Mhm.
to more to give them ways to be more active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes the
Mm-hmm.
students are concerned about their mistakes. No, so I think that we need to encourage them that the most important thing is to produce something.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's a good idea to encourage them to in this kind of tools. No,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And also to evaluate their development and
yeah,
to work further in the mistakes, about the mistakes, about the difficulties that they have. But it's a great tool to make them produce, and you analyze what you have to focus a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more.
yeah,
Yeah. And of course, I think it's also important to remember that you don't have to use these kinds of tools every single class,
No,
or one of your classes might just only use one of these things. I'm not saying that we need to start completely jamming our lessons full of these. That would be overwhelming.
yeah.
no,
It
um,
depends on their personality. No, as you said
yeah.
before, some adults they are not into games, for example. So this is a good thing about new technology that we have a lot of possibilities, a lot of options. No?
Hmm.
Yeah.
I know it's also something good to break the rhythm, to
Hmm.
make something different, to escape the routine.
Yes. Definitely.
That once in a while you do something different to
Mhm.
generate creativity from them.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Very good.
excellent. And the last kind of point here is that it seems like virtual education is kind of here to stay, right?
Yes.
Um,
Absolutely.
so this, coronavirus, I think, has really changed the way schools and, whole education as a whole is seeing that we can teach online. There are benefits. There are challenges, but this is something we're going to have to adapt to and learn eventually, um, because I think education is going to be changed. It's going to be different now. Um, so even if you do find yourself back in a physical classroom, face to face with students, this is pretty much all of this stuff is things you can use. Are things you can use in the physical classroom also. Um, so it's versatile, it's flexible, um, and hopefully you have some new things to explore now, to play with, and see what's useful for you. Yeah, whoops.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
thanks.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Congrats.
Thank
Very
you,
good. Very good.
Lindsay. Yeah, it's awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really great experience.
Good.
I like it. Mhm.
Thank you for
Yeah.
your time, your interest. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Great.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm sure other people have ideas and tools and resources they use also. So maybe if we do get a kind of discussion board or forum open for
Mm-hmm.
teachers,
Mm-hmm.
you can share some of your ideas also,
Yep,
because there's a lot out there.
Excellent.
yep,
Yes.
definitely.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Excellent.
Brave new world.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All
More
Okay.
right,
meetings like this.
great.
That's
All
my
right.
vote. More meetings.
Yeah.
I follow. I
Yes.
follow the
Wonderful.
speak.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks
Okay.
for your time, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
Okay,
you.
thank
Thank
you.
you very much. So now you know this video will be uploaded on our YouTube channel.
Great.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. Yes. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you all. Lindsay, once again, thank you very much
Yeah,
for
great.
this moment.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. All right.
Okay, bye
I've
bye.
got a class to get to. Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Yeah. Bye bye.